Hello and welcome to the High Note Podcast. I am your host, Sean Smith. Hey, welcome back, everybody. I feel like I was just talking to you guys. And again, we're on a pretty good schedule here now. It's basically once a month you can listen to the High Note Podcast anywhere you listen to your podcast, wherever you're listening to it now. Actually, you can just go ahead and hit subscribe, and then the podcast will just magically drop into your phone or whatever thing that you're listening to this on. You just go ahead and hit subscribe. If you can't find a link, if you don't know where to get it, you can just go to highnoteblog.com and you can check out a link to this podcast. It'll be right there with McKenna Jr. You can click on that, and there will be links to Stitcher and Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all of your favorite podcast platforms will be right there. So I'm recording this right now as Hurricane Ian is bearing down on us. It's almost here in South Jersey. This is Saturday, October 1st. Happy October, everybody. Welcome to officially fall. Since I spoke to you last, it's definitely gotten a lot colder over here. And definitely thinking about all of our friends down there in Florida that got absolutely decimated by this storm. I remember it was around this time when Hurricane Sandy hit back in 2012, and so similar. But this storm is definitely taking its toll on Florida and is making its way up the coast. It's not done. It's not quite here yet. We're just getting a little bit of wind and rain and flooding, but nothing like they're getting down there. And definitely just wanted to tell everybody, thinking of you down there, and hope everybody is well, and best of luck with the recovery down there in Florida and the central eastern part of the United States that's dealing with this storm. We're just getting a little bit now, and here in Atlantic City, we just got done the Frantic City Festival, which was really cool. It brought me back to my punk rock roots. I remember seeing the Bouncing Souls way back in 2000 and 2001 at Warped Tour. Those were the shows that kind of really got me into the music scene, into the punk rock scene, and introduced me to a lot of bands that would be my future favorite bands, and then people who I would meet later on and would become friends who performed at those at Warped Tour 2001. So shout out Zach Lawrence. So anyway, really cool, really loved it. It was a fantastic, it was right there on New York Avenue at this Orange Loop amphitheater that they built. It was in a parking lot, which reminded me of Warped Tour, because Warped Tour was in a parking lot, and it was definitely in that area is a super cool area. It's home to, back in the day, there were a lot of music venues on New York Avenue. There still are music venues on New York Avenue. There's Bourrée right there. There's Anchor Rock Club right there. Right around the corner, Tennessee Avenue Beer Hall. That's the whole Orange Loop area. They regularly have music and stuff. So really cool that they're bringing back this area, keeping it alive, keeping punk rock alive, and the Bouncing Souls were just absolutely amazing. These guys have not missed a step, and it was just fantastic to see them again. So you can check out that review of that concert on highnoteblog.com. There is a blog component to this podcast. Every Tuesday, I usually do a music review, and sometimes it's a concert review. So the most recent one was this Frantic City show. And shout out to former podcast guest, two-time podcast guest, I believe, Kevin Barrett was there with me. He pretty much convinced me to go, and shout out to Kevin Barrett. We had a fantastic time. And check out highnoteblog.com. You can check out that review and see music reviews every Tuesday. And then every Friday, you can see all of the albums that were released every week for New Music Friday. I just put up a big list of all the albums, and you can check them out, and hopefully, maybe see a new album from an old favorite artist, or maybe pick up a new artist, just by looking at the list there. So I also want to give a shout out to my good friend Paul Dixon, who has written the intro and outro music, which you just heard the intro music. Hopefully you didn't skip over it. And the outro music, maybe you'll stick around for it. So big shout out to Paul Dixon for the free songs. Much love, buddy. We'll do like an NPR deal where I just have to mention your name on every podcast for using your songs. So for licensing the music. So much love and many thanks to Paul Dixon. So my new friend Mike McKenna Jr. He is a singer-songwriter from Cape Breton Island. Cape Breton Island is in Nova Scotia, Canada, and he's an island guy just like myself. And Mike and I just hit it off. I mean, right away, I met him on Thursday. He was one of the first new people that I met at the festival, and I actually thought he was the guy from Jay and the Causeways. I guess I thought he was Jay from Jay and the Causeways just because of the hat, and I was too preoccupied with trying to figure out how I was going to photograph Talisk, and just ended up chatting with this guy, and we exchanged social media right there on Thursday. And then on Friday, I caught his workshop. He was doing a wheel decide where they spin the wheel, and you get to they do a topic based on what a person spins. The wheel has different topics on it. The person gets up and spins it, and then that person who's next on stage, there's like 4 or 5 people on stage, they have to sing a song about that topic. So I saw Mike McKenna Jr. on Friday, and then on Saturday, I ran into him while he was signing autographs at the merch tent, and I said, hey, man, I just got to get you on the podcast now, because I just keep seeing you. And then actually after we recorded this podcast, we saw him walking by the beer tent, and we, as our friend Jessica, shout out to Jess, said that we were corrupting the talent. We convinced them to hang out with us inside of the beer tent while we listened to Livingston Taylor and drank some beers. And Justina got us some Tuckeditos, which are these little taquito things that were a vendor at the festival, and they have a little bow tie, a little cute little bow tie as their logo. So shout out to Tuckeditos, another non-sponsor, but getting a shout out this week. Every week I got a new shout out non-sponsor. But at your next festival, if you see Tuckeditos, if you see that bow tie, just go ahead and do yourself a favor and get one. They're amazing. So it was cool because when we recorded this podcast, so Danielle and Millie from Victory Lap Media, they found this area for ADG7 for me to record, and then we're waiting for Mike to get off stage and come up, and then all of a sudden there's like all of this noise, and they were breaking down the fencing for one area of the festival because it was a Sunday. It was Sunday that I recorded this, the last day of the festival, so they're breaking down part of the festival. Luckily, they took a lunch break, so it was a short podcast, but as fate would have it, we were right next to where Mike's van was that we talk about in this podcast. So he's got pictures of this van that he restored with his father on his social media, on his Instagram. Check out Mike McKenna Jr. on social media. That's McKenna, Mike McKenna Jr. And then MikeMcKennaJr.com is where you can learn all about him. You can get his latest album, At the Edge of the World, which is really cool. And you can learn about his upcoming shows, which are November 5th, Saturday, November 5th, Nova Scotia Music Week at the Highlands Art Theatre in Sydney, Cape Breton. And then he's also going to be performing Thursday, November 10th at the Carlton, and Thursday, November 10th at the Carlton in Halifax, and then Saturday, November 12th at Cape Breton at the Brodor Lakes Inn. So I'll do that one more time. So it's Saturday, November 5th, Nova Scotia Music Week at the Highlands Art Theatre in Sydney, Cape Breton, and then Thursday, November 10th at the Carlton in Halifax, and Saturday, November 12th at the Brodor Lakes Inn in Cape Breton. So those are in Nova Scotia, Canada. So for all of my northern listeners, for everybody who's on the border within driving distance, for everybody who's in Canada, it's one little country up there, right? Just cruise on over to Cape Breton and see our buddy. So really love this podcast. Just much love to Mike. We really did have a great time together. And without further ado, here is my interview with my new friend and yours, Mike McKenna Jr. Hello and welcome to the High Note Podcast. My name is Sean Smith and I am here with Mike McKenna Jr. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you so much for having me.
And you're a singer-songwriter from whereabouts again?
I'm from Cape Breton Island, Nova Scotia in eastern Canada.
Amazing, amazing. So, Mike, we're here at the Philadelphia Folk Festival. Is this your first year here?
This is my first year here. It's been a great experience.
Awesome, awesome. Now, I just love the way that I met you because this is like totally festival. The way it happens is I saw you backstage on Thursday night, camp stage. I was waiting to take photos of Talisk, and I totally thought you were somebody else. I thought you were a guy who was playing in the previous band, and you were Canadian and polite. And you
I almost pretended to be him just for a second, just to mess with you. But,
As I ask you for your phone number and ask you to sign my shirt, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I almost did. I was like, who am I making this out to?
So we connected right away on social media, and I got to catch your set on Saturday, and then sure enough, I walk out of the merch tent, and there you are signing autographs and run into you again. So thanks for your time, Mike. I appreciate it.
You know, it's been great to meet you. Been great hanging with you, man. Yeah.
Absolutely. So how is your festival going so far? Tell me about your experience.
Well, I've been hearing about this festival for a long time. I think a lot of people that perform here say that because it's true. And this festival is an important festival to the folk music community. I was definitely, there was a bit of imposter syndrome and, you know, being intimidated by the long list of, you know, legendary performers that have played here over the years. But I was pretty excited to come down here, to be honest with you. I'm pretty happy to be here, and I can't wait to come back, actually.
Oh, yeah.
I've been having a great weekend, yeah.
Well, I hope they have you back. If I can vote for you, I'm definitely voting for you.
Thank you very much, man. I'll be coming back with a band. And we're gonna make it big next time. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're solo here. You're a singer-songwriter. Is that how would you describe your music, Mike?
I like to write about Canadiana. I like to write about stories, not just Canadian stories, but stories from the Maritimes where I come from Eastern Canada, especially stories about Cape Breton Island, my home. I like to talk about things in Atlantic Canada that maybe aren't known by the rest of the world. Atlantic Canada is a smaller part of Canada. It's not maybe got the same population as these, you know, as Ontario and Quebec and British Columbia with Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, right? We have Halifax, which is a pretty small city, as our biggest city, and then just tons of small towns around that. And so the East Coast is a real small town vibe. And I grew up listening to a lot of American folk music, and I wanted to take the way that these American storytellers told their songs about Appalachia and California and New England, and I wanted to tell those same types of stories about where I come from because I think those stories were undertold.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I love Canadian folk. I'm a big Stan Rogers fan.
Me too.
Yeah, so who are some of your influences?
So my influences changed a lot over the course of my life, you know, and early in my songwriting life, I would say that James Taylor. You know, my father and mother used to go to his concerts when they were in university. My dad, being from New England, would take my mom from Nova Scotia down to Massachusetts, to the Berkshires, go see James Taylor, and she loved it. And so that played in my house a lot growing up. And as a kid, I thought, oh, that's my dad's music. But when I got older, I realized how nostalgic I was for his songs, and I did more of a deep dive into who he was. And aside from James, Neil Young, of course.
You know, love Neil Young.
A lot of Neil Young, like Jackson Browne, you know, songwriters, storytellers. You know, I listened to a lot of music and just a lot of different genres growing up, but I eventually, as an adult, gravitated towards the storytelling aspect of songs that maybe I didn't appreciate as much as a kid, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of great Canadian storytellers, you know, like Stan or like Gordon Lightfoot, and so Joni Mitchell, and so we come from a long line of great songwriters in Canada. And this Folk Fest has showcased a lot of those songwriters, and I kind of wanted to keep on that tradition.
Yeah, and how does this? When I saw you at the camp stage, you were doing a workshop. How do you like that type of format as opposed to just yeah?
I love it. It's different. It's apples and oranges. You know? You get up and play a set, and you've prepared this set. You take the audience on an emotional journey, right? You know, and maybe you kind of walk them through song by song, and you have it all planned out. And when you get up and you do it in the round like that, you kind of have to take them on that journey in an ad-lib way, because the person that played before you, they play a song, and you might want to have a continuation of that subject matter. And so you can't really walk in with a set list.
Sure.
If you want to do it effectively, and if you want to have fun with it, and if you want to do it in the way that the audience is going to appreciate it the most, you get up there and you just kind of pull out a song that seems appropriate at that time. And so I think that brings another type of spontaneity to your show that might not happen in a set, right? And the collaboration that you might have with other artists, or just meeting artists. It's the best way to experience an artist is by sitting next to them while they play a song.
Yeah.
It's the best seat in the house.
Yeah, that's amazing. And is this different from other festivals that you've been to, or do others do workshops playing in the round, as you say?
Folk festivals in Canada do a lot of workshops. And,
Okay.
And so I've done the workshops at Vancouver Island Music Fest in Comox, British Columbia, and that was my first time doing one of these styles of workshops. And so yeah, that's a big thing right across Canada. They love the workshops, and I started doing song circles in Cape Breton. The storytelling aspect of the song circle and the story behind the song was something that actually really pulled me into doing this style of music. Actually, you mentioned the other day, you talked about interviewing Dave Gunning.
Yeah, I love Dave Gunning.
And in 2010, I had just come back from living in Australia for a year. And that's really where I started writing my first songs. I was working at music festivals as a bartender. I was just, fresh out of university, and I just wanted to go backpack and travel. And so I started writing some songs, and then I came back to Canada, and one of the first things I did was go to a show in Nova Scotia, a song circle, with Dave Gunning and Gordie Sampson and Bruce Guthrow and J.P. Cormier.
Wow.
So they're all very well-known musicians from the East Coast. And that was the first time I really sat down and listened to an In the Round in that way, and I was like, I love this.
Yeah.
I'm really into this. I love this format, the song for song. The stories came out a little bit more too, and my mom actually won the guitar signed by all four of them that night from the raffle. So I still have that home, but that was my first introduction to Dave Gunning.
Okay.
And now I've crossed paths with him many times, but funny you mentioned the In the Rounds is because that In the Round changed my life.
Oh, that's great. It's one of my favorite parts about this festival, and I feel like this festival is unique not only in that way, but in the whole campground. Have you had a chance to walk up and see the sights?
Yeah, I was up at the campground last night, and I went the night before too without my guitar by mistake. I just kind of wandered up there, and I realized that I should have brought it, and so I got adopted by a crew of people. When I first walked in there, they saw me with my guitar. They're like, "You're part of us now." And so I wandered around with them, and they took me. I had no idea, how much of a little city that would be up there.
Yeah.
I've been to festivals where the camping is just straight tents, and then people get up and they leave their tent and they come to the main part where the stages and and all the shops and stuff are.
And then they set up there. They have their own little tarps and everything.
Yeah,
on the
but
hill.
there they have their own their own showcases with sound techs and everything. I couldn't believe it. So I played in a bar last night in the tent city. With a fiddler and a mandolin player, and I mean like a proper bar.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been pretty great, and I'm gonna probably go back up there tonight.
Oh, that's great.
I was out till 4 a.m. up there last night, and we had a blast. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it has a way of just sweeping you up. When Trombone Shorty was here years and years ago, he did the Saints Go marching in, and they were marching until probably about 4 a.m.
They were going pretty late last night. I left at 4, and it was still bumping.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I really appreciated it up there, and maybe I'll camp next time I come into town. Why not?
I heard today that around 5-6 o'clock you get the changing of the guard, where some people are going to bed and some people are waking up and getting ready for the next day.
I think I was about to witness that. I was on my way out to make sure that I wasn't bothering anybody.
So is this part of your tour? How long have you been touring for?
I've been touring right now like straight since May. I was playing a lot of shows around Nova Scotia. I played the East Coast Music Awards at the beginning of May and then followed it with dates right through May and June. I played all over Cape Breton, mostly in August, just leading up to this festival. So, yeah, I had a show on Tuesday and basically had to be here for Thursday.
Oh, wow.
18-hour drive from Cape Breton down to Philadelphia. So, yeah, this is the end of my dates for the next little while. I'll go back and play some shows in Cape Breton mid-September.
Cool.
And I'll be playing Nova Scotia Music Week in November and a few Nova Scotia dates then. So I'm kind of right in the middle of it, actually.
Okay, good. Nice. So how did you get down here?
So I got down here in a camper that I bought last year. It's a 1985 Dodge Okanagan, and my father and I completely redid the inside of it. It had like the old fake wood on the styling, and I almost thought about gutting it. And I had seen I'm sure so many people during the pandemic were watching van build videos.
Yep.
It was pretty, a lot of people were doing this. So I thought about gutting it, and then I just decided to keep everything the same on the inside. And we put birch birch hardwood floors that were
Wow.
actually they were left over from the hardwood floors in my house.
Oh, wow.
My dad built our house in 1992
Oh, jeez.
in Nova
Okay.
Scotia, and still had some of the hardwood left, and it was
Oh, wow.
birch that was milled in Cape Breton and everything. So I have a nice little piece of Cape Breton in this
Oh,
van,
man.
and we did Eastern cedar on the walls, and so it smells beautiful. It's like a little log cabin in there, and and I took that down on its first adventure. I've been touring with it since June. Had it on the road in Nova Scotia, taking it around and taking on little mini trips to test it, and it did well. It made it up through the Highlands in Cape Breton, and as long as
Wow.
it got up that Smoky Mountain, I knew it was going to be okay coming down here.
Oh, that's great.
And yeah, for the drive down to Philly, it was beautiful, and it was an incredible drive. And it rained from New Brunswick right to Massachusetts. I
Oh,
was
wow.
almost in the rain for 90% of the trip, I would say, and the van still handled fairly well enough that I made it here.
Wow. Now, is this the furthest you've driven south, not just in the van, but just driving in general?
I did a tour in 2017, and I ended down in Nashville.
Oh, okay,
And
yeah.
it was my first real tour of the United States, and
Okay.
I had started up in Canada, and I played a couple of shows in Toronto and Montreal, and then I went all the way down the East Coast. So that was the furthest south that I had played at that time, and I played in the round in Nashville as well.
Oh,
And I
great.
did some co-writing down there, and and that was a great trip. And this is my first time back playing in the U.S. since then. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Did you get that hat in Nashville? That's a Nashville-looking hat.
This hat is actually from Australia.
Oh, wow. Okay.
When I was living in Australia, but I actually have another hat here with me this weekend that I wear for most of my shows that is from Nashville.
Okay, gotcha.
It's the same style.
Yeah, yeah.
Got it at the Gorin Brothers when I was down there for Americana Fest a few years ago, and I couldn't leave Nashville without getting a new hat.
That's cool. So
Yeah.
remind me again, what were you doing in Australia? You just went from one island to the other, huh?
Australia was it was before I became a professional musician, so it was an in-between time for me. It was a developmental time for me. So I just wanted to backpack, and I wanted to figure out who I was and escape the rat race, and that's basically why I went there. I flew to Brisbane, and I lived in Brisbane for about a year. A friend of mine from Canada flew there towards the end, and we backpacked around Australia and New Zealand together, and a bit of Southeast Asia. And when I came back to Canada, I had a lot of new musical influences from Australia's music scene.
Yeah.
They have a whole different thing going on over there.
Oh, yeah.
And
yeah.
a lot of great soul and R&B music from New Zealand. There was a lot of things that influenced me there, and the way that I sing and the way that I write music that I didn't realize it until maybe a few years after I got back from there, how much that time over there had an effect on me.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, do you draw on any of that in your songwriting at all? Any of your travels? Maybe not even just in Australia, but around or are you more? I know we talked before, but you talk a lot about Canada.
Yeah,
Where do you get your inspiration?
I did a lot of traveling, and you might think that I would write a lot of songs about my experiences traveling, but I found that traveling made me learn more about who I was and where I came from. And so that ended up becoming a big theme of my songwriting, probably because of that traveling. So rather than telling a lot of stories about things that happened to me on the road, it was the time on the road made me think about home and Cape Breton and Nova Scotia and Canada in general. And once you leave your own hometown or you leave your own country, that's where you really learn what your culture's about, because you find yourself explaining it to people all the time. And they say, oh, where are you from? Oh, I've never heard of that place. And you find yourself trying to summarize where you come from and summarize the culture. It's like a chef trying to talk about their food or something. It's like you just have to go.
Yeah.
And you have to live it and breathe it and go smell the smells there and go hear the sounds. And so, it's a hard thing to describe to somebody from the opposite side of the world about this tiny little island, Cape Breton. And so I for a long time, I found myself saying I was Nova Scotian,
Okay.
and that's maybe a little bit more recognizable to some people, and it took me a while to introduce myself maybe as a Cape Bretoner more,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew that deep down that's a different cultural identity from the rest of Nova Scotia, and so it's important to be proud of that and to talk about that. There's just so many people that traveling across the world that didn't necessarily know where it was.
Yeah.
And so I think writing songs about that also became a way of me making sure that people maybe to not necessarily put Cape Breton on the map musically. Cape Breton really punches above their weight in terms of musical output. I'll be far from doing that, but at least contributing to that, and at least trying to say, okay, maybe I can tell stories about that Cape Breton that give a window into our culture and into our history and our stories from somebody that's never been here.
Yeah, yeah. And so is that when you go into like writing an album, like your most recent album, are you trying to tell a story or try to make sure that you include certain things that you think are important? Or are you just trying to pick the best songs that you maybe are working on,
I find myself writing songs in batches that thematically, make sense together. But sometimes in an album, I'll throw in an odd song that doesn't fit in there just to give the listener something different and to not, to let those other ones stand out even more. And so I do like to sit down and consciously think about what I'm writing about at different times. And my first record, Traveling Man, was an EP that talked a lot about, my generation and kind of the post-industrial situation in the Maritimes, where all the industries, the cod fishery and the steel plants and the coal mines had all shut down, and people found themselves moving out to Western Canada in the 90s and 2000s.
Yeah.
And so I talked a bit about that, and that became a theme in that album. And then the next album, I went much further back in time. Pacific Northwest Bound was my first full-length album, and I went into the 1800s and some of the older history of the Maritimes. And now my newest record, At the Edge of the World, I got into the 20th century and got into the 1900s and started talking about a little bit more of the coal mining history, a little bit more of the formation of labor unions and stuff in the 20s and 30s, and some of the big coal and steel strikes. The United Mining Workers of America here in Appalachia basically sided with the miners up in Cape Breton, where I come from. And so I talked a bit about that in my newest album. And my next record, I don't really necessarily want to share completely what it's going to be about, but I just spent 2 years being back in Cape Breton after writing these 3 records in Montreal. I've lived in Montreal for the last 10 years, and so most of the writing for those first 3 albums was there, and so most of the writing for my next album, I was actually in Cape Breton writing it.
Okay, great.
And so we'll see where that takes me.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome that you get to go home for your most recent album.
It was a nice new reconnection to home, because over the past decade of living in Montreal, I'd be coming home to play shows, and I'd come home a couple times a year to visit my folks and do a lot of writing there. But the last 2 years, Quebec was completely on lockdown, and it had a curfew, and shows were a little bit harder to come by. So I relocated back to home, had a great time reconnecting with home, getting inspired again in an even deeper way than I was before, and playing shows for the people who really understand these stories deeper than most. And that's been a big part of my time in Cape Breton and Nova Scotia the past couple of years, is going from playing shows to people around North America and talking about Cape Breton to playing it for Cape Bretoners.
Yeah.
Who even know some of the people that I'm talking about in the songs, or know the places and know the references in a way that surprises me sometimes.
Oh, that's great. Now, and when you come to a festival like this, do you try to draw, because the history stuff that goes over big? How do you put together a set list, and how do you try to prepare, or do you try to weave in maybe some songs that you're working on for your new album?
Sure. A folk festival is a great place to debut songs that have a great story to them, or songs that have some kind of historical element, because these folk festivals were developed as a place to showcase that type of thing. So when I come to a folk festival, I know that it's an audience that's willing, an audience that's very open. And so not only have I been playing some of the songs that maybe don't work on the radio or in a bar or club, and I've been playing them here, but I've definitely been showcasing new songs. Some of these ones that I'll have on my next record, I've played at least 3 or 4 of them here this weekend, and it was a great reaction from the audience. I think they were totally receptive to that type of thing.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. That's awesome, man. And what do you think of the audience? You talked about the campground and stuff, but what do you think of just the reception of the crowd and how they are out on the hill there? I know it's been a hot weekend, but
I'm impressed that some of them sit in the sun like that too. There's shade over to the right hand side. Yeah. And a lot of people go for that, but some people sit right in the middle. And so. Yeah, it seems to be a pretty dedicated crowd. I can definitely see people engaged, and we did the first in the round I did this weekend was a spin the wheel, so it was very audience interactive.
Oh yeah.
They got to spin this big wheel that had all the themes and subjects of the songs, and then we kind of had the subjects thrown at us. So I think the audience is really engaged, and I think that there's been a lot of participation, and sometimes more than I'm used to in a good way, get me out of my shell.
Yeah. Hopefully you made a lot of good friends in the campground.
I made a lot of good friends, yeah. A lot of great musicians that I met this weekend, but a lot of festival goers that I've had some really incredible conversations with that told me a lot of history around here, and people that have been coming to this festival since before I was born and have told me some incredible stories about some artists that I really look up to. I visited a photographer here just last night, and wow, this guy had some unbelievable things to say, and of all these people that he had taken photos of over the years. So yeah, I've made some really great connections.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And So, is there anything else? I just asked you a million questions. Was there anything that I didn't ask that you wanted to mention, Mike?
Maybe I'll mention the one thing that I probably should say is that I have a record that I made in early 2020,
Yeah.
beginning of the pandemic, and the last 2 years as shows have been slowly coming back. I've been really trying to get it out there. It's called At the Edge of the World. You can stream it anywhere you listen to music. I sell vinyl records of it as well. I pressed vinyl even throughout the pandemic, and I really had to get out to play physical shows to make sure I got those vinyl out there. So I brought them this weekend at the festival.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, that's basically, until my next album comes out, that's basically what I'm touring, and those are the songs and stories that I'm telling lately. And
that's awesome.
Yeah.
And you're going back to Canada after this. You're not going to be touring around here anytime soon?
Yeah, that's right. I'm going back to Montreal for the next little bit. I've been spending a lot of time in Nova Scotia, playing shows and reconnecting with my home, and now it's time to go back to where my belongings are, which is in Montreal, and take this beautiful van back up there with me. It's been in the shop, and it's been basically in like, my dad and I have used this as a workshop for the past couple of years.
Sure.
And, or the past year, I should say, as I've been redoing it. So it's basically been an artistic space, like a little office for me. And now I get to finally take it on the road. So I'm going to take it up to Montreal and maybe deck it out with a few more things that are sitting with my stuff back there.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Any plans at all to come back down here in the future?
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I've really been trying to increase my touring here in the United States the past couple of years. So now that this tour van is finished, I really want to take this on the road across America. So
that's
I
great.
think Philly Folk Fest was just the start of that, really, for me. And I'll go back to Montreal, maybe just for a couple months. I'll be playing shows in Nova Scotia in November, as I mentioned, and after that I'm wide open. So I'm going to be playing in Europe next summer at a festival called Tunnerfest in Denmark.
Awesome.
And I'll definitely be getting some shows in and some touring in the United States before I head to Europe next summer. So.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And where can people find you on social media? Do you have one that you prefer?
They can find me at Mike McKenna Jr. on pretty much every social media platform. On Instagram, you can find me on TikTok, on YouTube. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Mike McKenna Jr., thank you so much. I really appreciate your time,
Sean,
man.
thank you so much for having me, man. It's been great to meet you.
Oh, same here, man. Thanks.
Cheers.